I'm Chris Dunford, president of Freedom from Hunger, which is based in California. It's a global organization. As the name suggests, our concern is with people who are so poor that they're chronically hungry, which is about 1 billion people. And a good portion of those 1 billion people live in tropical areas that are affected by malaria, which is how we got involved in the fight against malaria. What we've discovered over the past 65 years, yes, we are a 65-year-old organization, and no, I'm not the founder of the organization. We've discovered, though, that the best way to support the self-help efforts of people who are chronically hungry is to provide them a combination of microfinance, health, and education. And in particular, the health and the education is the opportunity that we see to really promote behavior change that would improve prevention and treatment of malaria. Yeah, I first moved to Africa in 35 years ago. Lived for a couple of years in Kenya and about a year altogether in Tanzania. So that's how I got to know Africa. But for Freedom from Hunger, we're more focused in West Africa. And whether you're in West Africa, East Africa, or wherever in Africa, I mean, malaria is just, it's a huge deal. And so when I started working for Freedom from Hunger and we got involved in microfinance, we realized, what an incredible issue this is for people in participating in microfinance. They take loans, they deposit savings. They typically come together in groups, and it's typically women who are coming together in groups to take loans and deposit savings, and generally work with each other to repay, guarantee each other's repayment and such. So these groups are coming together on a regular basis. And so the organizations that we train to do this microfinance work, they get to know, their field officers really get to know these women, and it's impossible to become involved in the lives of women in poor communities, in particular in Africa, without becoming aware of the burden of malaria. So we started to do some research on the impacts of malaria from the point of view of the family and its health, but also its economy. And we discovered, doing some research in Benin and in Burkina Faso, that 30% of the income of poor families was going to deal with just one disease, malaria. And it's just such an incredible fact. And clearly, even if your concern, as is the case with a lot of microfinance providers these days, if your concern is with making some profit from your microfinance operations, even if that's your primary focus, you have to be concerned with the malaria situation for your clients, with their health, because health problems are the primary reason that people cannot repay their loans, or that don't return for new loans or drop out altogether. So it's really becoming more and more obvious to microfinance providers that they have to deal with malaria, microfinance providers in Africa in particular. Well, as I said, 30% of income going to just take care of the treatment of malaria, and that doesn't include the money that's lost, the time that is lost by having to stay home to take care of a sick child, or being sick yourself. In the typical episode, a bout of malaria was going to knock you out of your work for days at a time. Particularly for very poor families out in rural areas that are working in the fields, the time when labor is most necessary for working in the fields, for planting, for weeding and whatnot. This is the rainy season, and this is the malaria time. And to lose that much of your workforce in the family when you really need them out in the fields weeding and harvesting and that, it's just a tremendous loss. So what we've done is we've worked with partner organizations around the world to learn with them and then to teach others how to bring women in particular together in groups that guarantee each other's access to loans and to deposit savings together. This is an ideal model for credit unions, and credit unions are very big in Francophone, French-speaking West Africa. And in particular, we started working with credit unions and learned how to work with them and show them how to do group-based lending, which credit unions had not done before, in Burkina Faso. And so what these credit union field officers do, They're essentially taking the bank to the village. They go into a village and they invite, after of course getting the permission of the village elders, they invite the women of the village to form a credit group or a credit association. And this group is trained for a few weeks, and then it receives its first loan. They come together every week, initially every week, to repay part of their loan and to deposit savings. Now, because they're coming together on a weekly basis, and then as the group matures and repays its first loan, they're eligible to become have a second loan, a larger loan, which they distribute to the members of their group. This provides an opportunity to also do training for the field officer from the credit union to provide some kind of educational experience at the group meetings, because the group meeting can take a good hour or so. And so why not add value to the meeting has been our philosophy by providing education in vital topics, particularly a very vital topic for women in Burkina Faso is malaria prevention and how to treat a child or an adult with malaria. So a woman who gets a loan, she typically takes a loan and it starts at maybe $50. In West Africa, let's say it starts at $50. And she can get larger loans as she repays earlier loans. But why does she take the loan? Partly, what she tells the credit union is that she wants to invest the loan in starting or expanding a business. She's a woman in a rural community. She might go into the local town to buy utensils or salt or something in bulk that she can bring back to her community and sell. Or she might be buying produce like millet and turning it into grain and then selling it. So typically in rural communities, people take the loan to do some sort of agriculture-related business. But that's not the only reason they take the loan. They use part of the loan for a business, which is what they tell the credit union they're using it for. But they also use part of the loan for basic consumption needs, like if they have a health problem, to take the child or their husband or get themselves into a bush taxi and to the local clinic, which might be 12, 15 miles away. That's often one of the major costs of health problems is transportation to a clinic and then to buy medicine. So typically they'll use the loan in part for emergencies like that. Or they'll use it to buy clothes for their kids so they can go to school, to pay school fees, which are often required in these poorer countries. And then they'll deposit what they do with the savings that they get from the little bit of profit that they get on their business activities. They put some savings aside, and that acts as kind of a fund that they can use in an emergency, or to reinvest at some point. About 8 years ago, more like 9 years ago, start again. About 9 years ago, we started working with GlaxoSmithKline to develop, for the use of microfinance institutions in West Africa in particular, we started working with GlaxoSmithKline to develop a curriculum for malaria prevention and treatment that field officers of microfinance institutions in West Africa could use to educate women, and through the women to educate whole families and even communities. Glaxo provided us with funding also to do very careful research. We do a lot of research because we tend to be on the cutting edge of microfinance practice and adding value to microfinance with education and access to health services. And because this is new territory, we have to be prepared to show that it works. So we do a lot of careful research, and the research that we did on the malaria education module, as we call it, showed that in fact women were increasing their knowledge about what causes malaria. And of course, one of the things that's quite remarkable about this extremely common and also very deadly disease is the degree of ignorance in rural populations about what causes it. So just the fact that it's caused by a mosquito, or that it's the mosquito bite that's going to lead to getting malaria, is tremendously important for them to know, because that then reinforces the importance of sleeping under a mosquito net, preferably insecticide-treated net. So we found through the research that the education that we were doing was in fact increasing their knowledge of what causes malaria, how to prevent it, especially with mosquito nets, how to use mosquito nets, how to set them up properly, how to retreat them with insecticide as they get older. and so on. But also how to recognize that a child with a high fever and for a long period of time needs to go to the clinic and not wait too long. Discovered that we were increasing demand for the nets to the point where women were wanting to buy nets or obtain nets, and in rural areas where their nets were not available. And so that stimulated us to start reaching out to net providers to bring distributors out into the rural areas. And also started encouraging credit unions to start distributing nets, either for no cost or at a subsidized price. Because of the experience that we've had with doing this education in malaria treatment and prevention through microfinance institutions and showing that it actually works to change not only knowledge but behavior, it opens up a whole new possibility, because microfinance institutions are reaching something like 150 to 200 million clients every year at this time. Now, a good proportion of those are in Africa and therefore vulnerable to malaria. And so this opens up the possibility that microfinance institutions can become a distribution channel for malaria education and for behavior change, as well as the distribution of nets and such. So as well as the increase of income for people to be able to buy their way to the clinic and to pay for clinical services and medication. So what is exciting to us is that on one side, the the microfinance movement is discovering the importance of dealing with more than just the financial needs of people. On the other side, health providers are beginning to realize that they need to use non-health or non-conventional distribution channels to get health information, health treatment, and health products like nets out to the more remote areas that often are reached by microfinance institutions but by nobody else. And they're reached by microfinance institutions through a system that is financially self-sustaining. So this opens up the possibility of reaching millions and millions more people with life-saving, vital information.